My husband Daniel died on a Tuesday morning in March, in the parking lot of our own warehouse, less than 10 minutes after he'd kissed me goodbye over coffee. He was 41. No warning, no history, nothing any doctor could have caught. One of our dispatchers found him by his truck and called 911. I got the call still sitting at the kitchen table with my own coffee cup warm in my hands. I'm not going to describe those first days. There aren't words for that kind of emptiness, and they don't serve this story anyway. What matters is what was happening in the dark while grief had me by the throat. Carol, Daniel's mother, took over the funeral planning, and at the time, I was grateful. She handled the flowers, the seating, the obituary, all of it, while I sat in our bedroom unable to remember if I'd eaten that day. She brought soup to the house herself one afternoon, sat with me at the counter, and for 20 minutes she was just a mother who'd lost her son. Not the woman who'd once asked what my father did for a living like it was a credit check. She cried at the viewing, real tears, the kind you can't perform. I remember thinking, at least we have this in common. At least we both loved him. Patrick gave the eulogy. He talked about Daniel's vision, his fearless spirit, and then, almost offhand, he called the company the family's true legacy, carried forward together. I noticed it even through the haze of grief. It was a strange thing to emphasize at a funeral. I didn't understand yet what kind of groundwork that line was laying. Daniel had one small habit I never thought twice about. On the 16th of every month, without fail, he'd disappear for a couple of hours in the afternoon, usually came back smelling faintly like the bakery 2 streets from his office, never said where he'd been. I used to tease him that he had a secret life. He'd just laugh and change the subject. 12 years of marriage teaches you which doors not to knock on, and that one never seemed worth knocking on. By the following Tuesday, 1 week after he died, my sister Sarah came by with groceries, mostly soup I'd forget to open, and caught a courier leaving our driveway. The envelope was addressed to Daniel's brother, Patrick. The return address wasn't our corporate law firm. It was Gerald Whitfield, the family's personal estate attorney, the one Carol kept on a heavy retainer for trust matters. "Why would Patrick be getting mail about the logistics company at your house, Claire?" Sarah asked, standing in my kitchen with the grocery bag still in her hand. I told her she was reading too much into it. "Grief makes you paranoid," I said. "Families don't move on a body before the headstone's even ordered." I made her a cup of tea, sent her home, and went back to bed, half convinced I was protecting myself from a spiral that didn't exist. That decision, choosing comfort over caution, cost me 2 days I'd badly need later. By the time I actually opened my laptop, Patrick had already had 2 extra days inside our systems he otherwise wouldn't have had. 2 extra days to get a foothold before I even knew there was a fight on. To understand what I was protecting, you have to understand what the last 12 years actually were. Daniel and I met in our mid-20s, when his freight business was one overheating van that stalled at red lights and a clipboard full of promises run out of a rented garage with cracked concrete floors. He had this restless, reckless optimism, the kind that makes people either fall for you or worry about your financial future, sometimes both. His family worried. I fell for him. His parents, Carol and Robert, measured a person's worth in old money and a name on a marble door. Patrick, 2 years younger, was the safe one. Commercial banking, married early, always on time with a decent bottle of wine. Daniel was the gamble. I was the outsider who married the gamble. A shop teacher's daughter from the wrong zip code, which Carol made clear within the first 5 minutes of meeting me, smiling that tight little smile that told me exactly where I stood. I didn't marry his family. I married him. What his family never understood, what I'm not sure Daniel ever fully explained to them, was how much of that company was built at our kitchen table after the trucks were parked for the night. Daniel could walk into a room of skeptical retailers and walk out with a signed contract. He could not keep a ledger balanced for 6 weeks straight. Spreadsheets made his eyes cross, he used to say. So I came in. Quietly at first, doing weekend invoices around my day job. Then fully, once it was obvious the business would collapse under its own paperwork if nobody took real ownership of it. I built our books from scratch on a custom system because nothing off the shelf could handle our fleet depreciation schedules, our fuel variances, or payroll tied to mileage logs. I spread our banking across 3 institutions for liquidity and risk. I negotiated our credit lines and built the payroll system that paid 43 drivers on time for over a decade. Even the 3 weeks Daniel was hospitalized with a ruptured appendix and couldn't sign a single check. I held the master credentials for everything: the accounting platform, all 3 banking portals, payroll, the cloud storage where every contract and insurance policy lived. I'd set up 2-factor authentication years before most small businesses bothered, tied to my own phone, because I'd watched a friend's business get gutted by a hacked vendor account and swore it would never happen to ours. Daniel used to tell new hires, half joking, "I built the trucks. She built the concrete underneath them." The smart ones understood exactly what that meant. There was one line item, years back, that used to needle me a little during our personal account reconciliations, a flat $4,000 cash withdrawal, same amount, roughly once a month, no memo. I asked him about it exactly once, early on. "Old debt I'm clearing," he said, and something in his face told me not to push. So I didn't. I had a business to run and a husband who'd never once given me a real reason not to trust him. His family never did. To them, I did the numbers, a clerical detail, the way you'd describe someone doing the dishes. They never once asked how the cash flow actually worked or what would happen to it if I weren't the one holding the keys. In their version of the story, Daniel was the lone genius, and I was the supportive wife who happened to sit in the back office. There's one memory of Patrick I still turn over, even now. A Christmas, years back, when Robert made one of his jabs about Daniel's little delivery company, and I caught Patrick's jaw tighten before he laughed along with the table. Later that night, in the kitchen, I heard him tell his mother quietly that Robert didn't have to be that hard on him. Carol told him to mind his own business. I don't know what that moment meant in the end. I've thought about it a lot since. The year Robert refused to co-sign our $200,000 fleet loan was the clearest look I ever got at what we were up against. We'd landed our first major regional contract, big enough to need 10 new trucks in 60 days, and the bank wanted a second guarantor before they'd release the capital. Daniel, still naively hoping for his father's pride, offered him 10% of the contract's profits, just to sign for 12 months. Robert swirled his scotch, called the logistics market a bubble, said the business was being run from a kitchen table, and suggested Daniel sell the vans and let Patrick get him a teller job. I watched my husband walk out of that house like the wind had been knocked clean out of him. I didn't sleep for 3 nights after. I restructured our receivables, offered early payment discounts to accelerate cash flow, and found a lease-to-own deal with a truck manufacturer that cut the bank out of the equation entirely. We signed the contract anyway. 18 months later, it had generated over $1 million in net revenue. Robert credited it to good timing. That was the family's whole operating philosophy. We were never smart. We were lucky. 10 days after Daniel died, I finally opened my laptop, mostly to prove to myself I was being paranoid. I checked payroll first, out of habit more than anything. It had processed fine. Renata had handled it without me. I was about to close the tab when the security dashboard I'd set up years earlier during a compliance audit flagged something I almost scrolled past. 4 login attempts from an unfamiliar IP address. all within the 9 days since Daniel's death. I sat very still in the quiet house. The only sound was the refrigerator humming in the next room. Our corporate bank portal told the same story. Multiple login attempts from a device I didn't recognize, 2 of which had actually succeeded in viewing our balances and recent statements. They couldn't move $1, though. Every outgoing transfer over $5,000 required a one-time token sent to my phone, a safeguard I'd built in years before, back when a friend's vendor account got hacked and I swore ours never would. Whoever this was could see the numbers on a screen. They had no idea how the gears underneath actually worked, and that gap between what they could see and what they could actually touch was the only thing standing between me and losing everything. The feeling that settled over me wasn't fear. It was something colder, an insult. I called Marisol the next morning, our actual corporate attorney, not Whitfield. I asked her to quietly pull every document on file with the state. Our operating agreements, Daniel's will, the equity restructuring we'd filed 4 years earlier when our tax attorney recommended formalizing my ownership stake to protect the business from liability and succession issues down the line. What she came back with 2 days later wasn't the clean victory I expected. "There's a problem," she told me, and I could hear her choosing her words carefully. "The equity amendment is on file, but Whitfield's office is already arguing the state registry recorded it under an outdated entity name, a clerical mismatch from the original filing 4 years ago. They're using it to claim the restructuring never properly took legal effect, which would leave Daniel as sole listed owner at the time of his death. If that argument holds, his estate, and who controls it, becomes a probate question. A long, ugly one, decided by a judge who's never met either of us." I felt something in my chest go cold and small. For the first time since the funeral, I wasn't sure I was actually going to win this. 12 years of work, and it might come down to a filing clerk's typo I'd never once thought to double-check. "How long to fix it?" I asked. "I don't know yet," Marisol said. "Weeks, probably, and they know that too." Patrick came by the house 2 days after that call. He stood on my porch with a casserole dish his wife had made, and for one strange minute, he looked like a man with no idea what his own mother and lawyer were doing 40 minutes away. His eyes were red. He asked how I was sleeping. He asked if I needed help with anything around the house, the kind of thing people say when they don't know what else to offer. "I just wanted to check on you," he said. He looked tired, maybe guilty, maybe just exhausted from grief. I genuinely couldn't tell which, and some part of me didn't want to find out. I let him in. We sat at the kitchen table where Daniel and I used to argue over fuel costs at midnight, and we didn't talk about the business once. I wanted, badly, to believe that visit meant something. I wanted to believe my brother-in-law was just a grieving man checking on his brother's widow, and nothing more. It didn't stop what came next. 3 days later, Carol called the house herself, the only time she called me directly through the entire ordeal. "You have to understand what's at stake for this family, Claire," she said, her voice tight in a way I hadn't heard since the night of the funeral. "This isn't about money. It's about keeping something together that's bigger than any one of us." I asked her what, exactly, she thought she was keeping together. She didn't answer that. She just said Robert wasn't well, that the stress of all this uncertainty was hard on him, and hung up before I could push further. At the time, I read it as a mother defending her son's legacy, clumsily and too late. I didn't yet understand that Carol had her own reasons to be terrified of anyone going through Daniel's records, reasons that had nothing to do with the business at all. Within the week, formal notices went out on our actual company letterhead, using Daniel's still active email credentials, which I hadn't had the heart to deactivate, redirecting 6 commercial trucks, our warehouse equipment lease, and a $400,000 vendor contract into a shell entity Patrick had quietly registered 11 days after the funeral. My credentials slowed them down. They didn't stop them. One of the leasing companies, confused by two competing sets of paperwork landing in the same week, sided with caution and flagged two of our trucks for repossession pending ownership verification. Trucks that were mid-route when the notice went out, forcing Renata to scramble a same-day reroute so we didn't strand a driver 3 states away. Our smaller regional client, spooked by the conflicting notices, paused their shipping schedule for 9 days until ownership is clarified. 2 drivers, hearing rumors that the company might be sold off or shut down, told Renata outright they were updating their resumes. I spent those 9 days on the phone constantly, talking the client down, talking the drivers down, signing paperwork to release the trucks. And for the first time since the funeral, the fear wasn't abstract anymore. This could actually slip out of my hands while I was busy trying to hold every other piece of it together at once. Whoever had handed Patrick our internal client list and lease expiration dates knew our operation from the inside, knew which contracts were closest to renewal, which margins were highest. That wasn't guesswork. Renata noticed it first, actually, before I did. She mentioned, almost in passing, that Marcus had been unusually jumpy that week, avoiding her in the break room, asking odd questions about which leases were definitely locked in. It was enough for me to go back and run the access logs myself. I found a data export at 11:42 p.m. the Thursday after Daniel died, pulled under the credentials of Marcus Vance, our senior dispatcher, a man Daniel had personally floated an interest-free loan when his wife needed emergency surgery, a man who'd been at our table more than once. I drove to the warehouse that Sunday and called him into the conference room. He denied it flat, said someone must have used his login, that he'd never touch our systems, that he'd been at his daughter's recital that night and could prove it. I laid the access logs on the table, timestamp, device ID, the exact files pulled. He shifted, said maybe he'd left his laptop open at the office and someone else used it. I laid down the second piece, a network log showing the same device pinging from his home address, not the warehouse, at 11:42 p.m. He went quiet, started talking about how tight things had been since his wife's surgery, how the insurance had only covered part of it, how they were 3 months behind on the mortgage, and the bank had already sent one warning letter, how he'd just needed some breathing room, and told himself it wasn't really stealing if the company was going to be sold off anyway. I let the silence sit. Finally, his face just folded. "Patrick told me you were going to liquidate and walk away with the insurance money," he said. "He offered me a director title at the new company. 20% more than I make now, enough to catch up on the house. I have 3 kids, Claire. I wasn't thinking straight. I just saw a way out, and I took it." "In 12 years, I said, "have I ever missed a payroll? Ever told you no when your family needed time off?" He didn't answer. He didn't need to. I didn't fire him. I needed his cooperation more than I needed the satisfaction of cutting him loose. He handed over his phone and gave a written statement that night. What followed wasn't the clean 4-day surrender I'd imagined. Whitfield's office filed a motion disputing the validity of my equity stake, leaning hard on the clerical filing error. For nearly 3 weeks, Marisol and her paralegal worked to get the state registry to correct the original record, while Whitfield's team stalled every filing they could and floated, through back channels, the idea that I might want to settle quietly before things got expensive. One of our 2 largest clients received a direct call from the company's new leadership, offering better terms to switch contracts entirely. We held them barely, with a personal call from me and a temporary rate concession that cost us real money we couldn't really spare that quarter. There were nights during those 3 weeks I genuinely didn't know which way it would go. Marisol was careful never to promise me an outcome. "We have a strong position," she'd say. "Strong isn't the same as certain." I'd hang up the phone and sit in the dark kitchen, wondering if 12 years of work was about to be decided by a clerical typo from 4 years ago that none of us had ever bothered to check. What finally broke it wasn't one letter. It was the 48 hours after Marisol filed a motion for emergency injunctive relief, supported by Marcus's signed affidavit, the access logs, and a corrected certified copy of the equity filing that the state registrar's office had finally amended that week. For most of that first day, it looked like it might not be enough. Whitfield's team challenged Marcus's credibility outright, calling him a disgruntled employee facing termination, willing to say anything to save his own job. And for a few hours, the judge's clerk gave no indication which way it would go. Marisol called me that evening just to say she didn't have an update yet, and I sat on the kitchen floor for a while, the same floor I used to sit on waiting for test results, waiting for surgery updates, waiting for any piece of news that would tell me whether the ground under me was solid or not. It held. The corrected filing, time-stamped and notarized, was harder to argue with than Marcus's character, and by the next morning the judge had seen enough. A judge granted a temporary order freezing any further asset transfers pending a full hearing and gave Whitfield's office 5 days to respond. They called for a settlement conference instead. Patrick and Whitfield walked into Marisol's office looking smaller than I expected. Carol and Robert sat in the back, still trying to hold their posture like none of this touched them. Marisol opened with the affidavit, the access logs, the corrected filing, the text messages where Patrick had offered Marcus a bribe. Whitfield didn't open the binder. He already knew what was in it. He adjusted his glasses, glanced at Patrick, then at Carol, and gave the smallest, almost involuntary shake of his head. "My client will withdraw all claims," he said, his voice dropping an octave. "Dissolve the secondary entity and cover Mrs." He paused, realizing mid-sentence he didn't actually know how to address me anymore. "Claire's legal costs. We're prepared to call this a misunderstanding." "It wasn't a misunderstanding," I said. "You tried to take a company my husband died building because you couldn't stand that the girl from the wrong zip code was running something bigger than your safe little bank job, Patrick. And the corrected filing your own lawyer just spent 3 weeks fighting? It says I am the sole owner of this company. I always was. You just bet the company name mattered more than the paperwork." Carol's hand tightened around her bag. "We are a family, Claire. We believe the business was a shared legacy. Daniel would have wanted—" "If you use my husband's name to justify this one more time," I said quietly, "I tell Marisol to send this to the state prosecutor by 5 o'clock. You have 10 minutes to sign." Patrick's hand was shaking too badly to hold the pen steady at first. Before he signed, he looked up at me, not at his mother, not at Whitfield, and said the only honest thing I ever heard him say through the whole ordeal. "Do you know what it's like?" he said quietly. "Watching your brother fail upward his entire life and have everyone call it passion? I did everything right. Stable job, on time, never asked Dad for a dime. And the one time I reached for something bigger, it wasn't even mine to reach for. I didn't have an answer for that. I'm not sure there was one that would have helped him. He signed anyway. The releases, the dissolution, a personal affidavit confirming he held no claim to anything we owned. Carol and Robert watched their safe, steady son sign away the only gamble he'd ever taken in his life and lose it completely in under 15 minutes. I didn't stay for pleasantries. I gathered my copy of the executed agreements, walked out into the afternoon sun, and stood on the sidewalk for a long moment. It was the first full breath I'd taken since the morning the dispatcher called me. It's been just over a year. The company is in the best shape it's ever been. 6 new trucks added this spring. a renewed 3-year contract with the client we almost lost during those 3 rough weeks. Renata, now formally our VP of Operations. Fuel costs down 12% on a new routing system. I see Carol and Robert only at functions I can't avoid. Patrick and I trade 2 clinical texts a year about old tax forms. There's no warmth left, just a cold, permanent peace, and a business that didn't miss a single delivery window through any of it. But one thread kept me up at night for months after. 11 days after the funeral, buried in the forensic export, Marisol's paralegal had flagged a single anomalous wire, just under our security threshold, routed through an offshore clearing account, $4,000. It hadn't come from Patrick's IP. It didn't match Marcus's footprint either. At the time, with the bigger fire already raging, Marisol's note on it just said, "Low priority, doesn't appear connected, recommend follow-up later." I filed it under later myself and didn't think about it again for months. 3 weeks ago, out of nothing but professional habit, I finally pulled the thread myself. 4 nights of tracing routing numbers led me to an old, dormant personal account of Daniel's I hadn't touched in 5 years. The wire that landed there had come from a private trust account under the name Carol Vance Holden, Daniel's mother. I dug into the history. Every 15th of the month for 2 years before he died, Carol's trust had wired exactly $4,000 into that dormant account. Every 16th, Daniel withdrew it in cash, 2 blocks from Whitfield's office. The same day, every month, he used to disappear without explanation. The bakery smell, the habit I'd teased him about for years. His private notes called it MR Trust. It took 2 more weeks of digging through Whitfield's public filings to understand what that meant. Margaret Ross, Daniel's biological aunt, sister to the father Robert, had legally erased from the family record 40 years ago when he married Carol. Margaret had been cut off from the family entirely, signed into silence with a small settlement decades back, and was now living in a modest assisted living facility behind on her bills. Daniel had found out 3 years before he died, by accident, going through old paperwork after his grandmother's estate closed. He'd confronted Carol, threatened to take the whole buried history public, and she'd agreed, quietly, monthly, $4,000 at a time, rather than let Robert or their social circle ever find out the family's perfect lineage was built on a lie kept alive for 4 decades. Carol had never once dealt with the facility directly. She'd never even seen its name on a bill. Daniel had set it up that way on purpose, so there'd be no record anywhere connecting Carol Vance Holden to Margaret Ross. Daniel was the only bridge between the 2 halves of that secret, and he'd built it deliberately narrow. When Daniel died, the bridge collapsed, and Carol panicked. She didn't know the facility's account information. She'd never needed to. The only channel she'd ever used was the one Daniel had taught her years ago, in case something happened to him. Wire the dormant account, and he'd handle the rest. So 11 days after burying her son, with no other way to keep the secret breathing, she used the only door she knew, hoping it would still work. It was a desperate, badly thought-out move from someone who'd spent 40 years getting away with careful ones. That was the wire that had been quietly flagged low priority and nearly forgotten. I drove upstate last week and met Margaret. She has Daniel's eyes, the same warm, restless brightness. She told me he visited every month with her favorite pastries and talked for hours about the trucks and the routes, and how proud he was of what we'd built together. "He told me you were the smartest woman he ever met," she said, holding my hand. "He said, as long as you were running the books, nothing in this world could hurt him." I set up a permanent monthly transfer to her facility from my own account. Not Carol's money, ours, the business's. Not because of a threat, because she belongs to Daniel, and what belonged to Daniel belongs to me. Carol and Patrick think the legal fight is over because they signed papers about the fleet. They have no idea what's sitting on my hard drive. or that I have absolutely no intention of using it unless they make me. They spent 12 years calling me the girl who did the books, like it was the smallest job in the building. Nobody ever tells you that the person who does the books is the only one who ends up knowing the whole story. Every account, every signature, every secret somebody thought was buried for good. I'm still in the back office. I just stopped being invisible there. Carol and Patrick think they got away with their secrets, but the truth is completely in my hands. If you were in my shoes, would you expose Carol's secret to the world right now, or keep it as your ultimate leverage? Tell me what you would do in the comments below. And if you love this story, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more. Thanks for watching.